All right, take a look at this. Way up in the Himalayas, right where India, Nepal, and Tibet meet, there's this tiny, remote patch of land. Now, it might not look like much, but it's actually the heart of a major disagreement between two countries that are, for the most part, really good friends.
So how big an area are we talking about? It's about 370 square kilometers. This includes places you might have heard of, like Kalapani, Lipulekh, and Limpiyadhura. And you know what the whole thing comes down to? It's a story about a river, a very old treaty, and a bunch of maps that just don't agree with each other.
So that's what we're going to do in this explainer. We're going to become map detectives, really, and dig into the Kalapani dispute by looking at the historical documents and, you guessed it, the maps that started this whole thing.
We'll kick things off by looking at what the disagreement is actually about. Then, we'll go back in time to an 1816 treaty. From there, we'll examine a key piece of evidence, a map some call the gold standard, before looking at a pretty mysterious shift in map-making that leads us right to the standoff we see today. Let's get started.
Okay, so what's the actual fight about? I mean, what's at the core of all this? Well, it all boils down to one, seemingly simple, geographical question. Where exactly does the Kali River start?
So here's the breakdown. On one side, you have Nepal. Their claim is that the true source of the Kali River is a stream that starts way over at the Limpiyadhura Pass to the west. If they're right, this whole disputed area is inside Nepal. But India sees it differently. They argue the border follows a smaller stream that starts from springs at Kalapani, further east, and with that interpretation, the entire area is inside India. See the problem? Two countries, one river, and two totally different maps in their heads. To really get this, we have to wind the clock way back. Over 200 years, actually, to the one document that was supposed to have settled this whole border issue once and for all. And that document is this, the Treaty of Sugauli. It was signed back in 1816 between the British East India Company and the Kingdom of Nepal. It's what officially ended a war between them, and most importantly for our story, it's what was supposed to draw Nepal's western border.
Now, check out the exact wording here. Article 5 says the border is the Kali River. Seems pretty straightforward, right? The river is the line. Simple. But, and this is a huge but, the people who wrote the treaty left out one critical detail. They never actually said which of the streams that feed the river was the main one.
And that one little oversight, it opens up the biggest question of this entire dispute. A question that wouldn't be settled by diplomats, but by the map makers who came along later. This is where things get really interesting. We're now at a key piece of evidence, a map that came out just a decade or so after the treaty, which supporters of Nepal's claim call their gold standard. And here it is. This is a map from 1827, and get this, it was published by the official map maker for the British East India Company itself. So if you're trying to figure out what the treaty really meant at the time, maps like this are pretty much the best evidence you can get. So what does this map show us? Well, it's pretty clear. It shows the river starting from Limpiyadhura, over in the west, and it actually labels that stream as the Kali River. What's more, modern science seems to back this up, showing that this western stream is way longer and carries a lot more water. Based on this, you'd think the case is closed, right? Well, not so fast. Because then, the map started to change. And that brings us to the plot twist in our investigation, a point where, for some reason, British mapmakers just started drawing this border completely differently. Just look at the difference here. On the left, you've got that 1827 map. See how the border clearly follows that big western stream? Okay, now look at the map on the right from decades later. The border has jumped east to a much smaller stream. It's a totally different alignment. This big change on the map started happening around 1879. And the craziest part? There was no new treaty, no formal agreement with Nepal. British surveyors just started drawing the line in a new place. So the big question is, why? Well, the answer probably has to do with the wider politics of the time, something called the Great Game. This was this huge century-long rivalry between the British and Russian empires for control of Asia. And that Lipulekh Pass, right in the middle of this disputed land, was a super important strategic spot for Britain to keep an eye on Russia and China. So by shifting the border on the map, they gave themselves a reason to control this critical path. Okay, so let's fast forward. How does all this map drama from the 1800s bring us to the complicated situation on the ground today? Let's just do a quick recap of how we got here. 1816, the treaty says the river's the border. 1827, early maps show that river starting in the west. Then, around 1879, the maps suddenly change. but Nepal kept acting like it was their land, even holding national censuses there in the 50s and 60s. The real turning point came in 1962, after the Sino-Indian War, when the Indian military moved in and set up posts in the area.
And that's exactly where we are today, in this stalemate. Nepal's claim is all about historical sovereignty. It's based on that original treaty, those first maps, and records of them running the place. India's claim, on the other hand, is based on those later maps and a principle called effective possession, which basically means they've had continuous military and administrative control of the area for over 60 years.
And this leaves us with a final, really fascinating question that gets to the heart of so many border disputes. When the maps and the reality on the ground tell two different stories, which one wins? Is a border defined by the ink on an old piece of paper, or by the boots on the ground and decades of control? What truly makes a line on a map a reality?